Also, I just started recording for the benefits of people who have not attended, or sometimes if you even you attended, if you want to come back to see the recording next time, you are always welcome to. I'm ending the poll now and share the results with everyone. Okay, looks like lots of people want to be the founding wizards. Some people want to be the negotiation ninja. A couple of folks want to be the tech genius. And for the people who participate in the poll, most of you participated in the last workshop. Thank you so much. Welcome back. And we also have people who have not attended the last workshop, but I'm really excited to see you for this workshop. Okay. I'm gonna to advance slides. Thank you all for joining us, and let's make this a fantastic session. So we are Rocky Mountain Institute. I have my colleague Tansy and Matthew joined me, and we also have Maggie joined us. Um, I want to introduce Matthew because most of you have not met him before. He just came back from a sabbatical. He's a manager of Rocky Mountain Institute. He launched and leads our Brightfields Accelerator work. He's a nationally recognized expert on Brightfields, landfill solar, community solar, project design, leveraging funding and financing for the energy transition. I want to pass it to Matthew to introduce himself and to say hi to everyone. Matthew, please.
Hey, thanks, Jibing. I feel like I don't need to introduce myself that much more. I'll just note I've worked in the brownfield space for most of my professional career with local governments and the clean energy space as well. Um, Two other things. I recognize how direct and personal brownfields can be for communities. I personally serve on my city's Brownfield Advisory Committee and Planning and Zoning Commission as well, and we have a lot of brownfields to work with in my community as well. So I've seen that firsthand, both professionally and personally. Um, I feel like I don't need to add much more to Jubing's lovely introduction. I do want to quickly address an elephant in the room before we dive in with this workshop, which is obviously the current events and election news from this week. Rocky Mountain Institute is a nonpartisan, independent nonprofit. We will continue to be doing this work. We feel pretty confident that the Brownfields program will also continue to exist. It was formed in the 1990s when EPA started to fund communities. It has gone through multiple different iterations and evolutions across multiple presidential administrations. It was recently uh, enhanced in 2018 with both Republican and Democratic co-sponsorship through the Build Act. Many of you may be familiar with that. That also increased the technical assistance dollars available for communities as well, of which is funding some of these types of workshops and our partnership with Kansas State University's Technical Assistance to Brownfields program. And then most recently, the bipartisan infrastructure law in 2021 also increased funding for brownfields and public infrastructure. So there have been multiple iterations and funding enhancements and technical assistance enhancements. We are relatively confident that the advice that we are offering today, the guidance that we provide, and the suggestions will be relevant both for this current grant period due next week, as well as future iterations of the Brownfield Grant Program and other Brownfields technical assistance. So with that, I will pass it back to Jubing to continue working us through the introduction here.
Thank you, Matthew. Really happy you're back with us. Next, I want to turn it to Maggie to introduce KSU TAB.
Morning, excuse me. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Drew Bing. Yeah, for those of you that have been on the previous 3 workshops, this will all be familiar. And for some of the new folks, here at TAB, we are the technical assistance to brownfields provider based at Kansas State University. The TAB program is a nationally funded program by the US EPA that allows us to provide free technical assistance to communities and tribes that are revitalizing properties or communities through brownfield redevelopment. All of our service are absolutely free. to the community and tribe. And we really try to customize and meet the specific need, whatever that is. We like to say we fill gaps just to, whether it's a lack of capacity or a lack of funding to maybe complete an environmental or a market analysis or something like that to get a project going. That's what we're here to do. Next slide. There are currently 5 TAB providers that provide assistance all across the US. At Kansas State, we are the TAB provider for all the communities that reside in EPA's regions 5, 6, 7, and 8. So all of the purple states there on the map. Next slide. And here's just a list of some of the offerings that we can support brownfields projects on. Our main goal is just to really help, a community or tribe build capacity by conducting education and outreach events. Again, maybe doing some community or site-specific assistance, such as, helping to develop a community resilience program into some of the planning, helping facilitate community outreach, identify funding sources, connecting with partners like RMI, reviewing brownfield grant applications, which we are in the thick of right now. And this by no means is an all-encompassing list. So if you have an idea, don't hesitate to reach out. Next slide. And we do have about 40 partners, including RMI. And this is, again, just kind of a list of some of the ways that we are able to support and provide TAB services through our partner network. These are just some key niche areas that a lot of our partners have with their experience and expertise. Next. And I will pass it back to Jubin.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for joining us today and share about what KSU TAB can offer. And I will just give a brief intro of Rocky Mountain Institute. As Matthew just mentioned, we are an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to accelerate clean energy transition for all. We have a history of more than 40 years to do research, to do whole system thinking, and we build unconventional partnership with many different types of organizations. And we are here to help you to transition your brownfields to a brightfields, thanks to the partnership with KSU TAB. Before we get started, I just want to quickly share some virtual workshop ground rules. Please message me if you don't agree with any of those rules. First one is, please be with us. Close other apps if you can, except Zoom. And please limit your distraction as if we are in an in-person workshop. Second one is be seen. When you are talking with people, please, if possible, please keep your video on during discussions or the activities. Third, be aware. Please keep yourself muted during presentation or when other people are speak. Let's create space for everyone to contribute. Last one is to embrace a learning environment. There will be different opinions. We really encourage you to speak up, to share your thoughts with us, and then we can surface all the ideas. One note is this is not a sales environment. I will remove whoever violates this rule. Thank you so much. All right, let's have an overview of our Brightfields Academy. We started our first workshop in September to introduce what are the Brightfields, what are the opportunities and challenges. Then the second workshop, we help provide education on how to evaluate your brownfield sites feasibility for clean energy reuse. In the last workshop, we started to talk about how to integrate Brightfields into your brownfields grant application. I will do a quick recap in a few seconds. And this workshop today is the second part of the workshop about how to integrate Brightfields into brownfields grant application. The deadline is coming very soon, and we are here to help. Then we will close our whole Brightfields Academy in December to share what are some other funding and financing opportunities. Okay, I have two quick annotation exercise like we usually did in the last three workshops. Just to refresh your memory how to do annotation. It depends on which version of Zoom you have. One approach is you will find a icon of a pen on the left of your screen. You click it, and then it will give you stamp option. Another approach is on the very top of your screen. There's a greenish bar saying you are viewing Jubing's screen. And next to it, there's a view option. You click it, and you will find the button of annotate. So, first question, how do you feel about diving into the EPA Brownfields grant process? From left, it's necessary, but maybe a bit dry. In the middle, the process feels a bit complex, but I'm here for it. On the right, this is exciting. Can't wait to learn more. Looks like most folks recognize that this process is complex, but we will try our best and be ready for it. It's fine if anyone feels it's dry. We don't have any stuff from EPA today, I think. Okay, thank you everyone. I'm gonna to clear all the drawings and advance to the next question. How easily have you found navigating EPA's Brownfields grant so far? Is there a GPS for this process? I'm so lost on the right. Is a smooth sailing on the left. In the middle, it's a bit of maze, but I'm managing it. Okay. Everyone who have annotated so far are in the middle. I'm on the same boat, everyone. Okay, I'm going to clear all the drawings and let's advance. Before we dive into the details for the contents for this workshop, I want to do a quick recap of what we talked about in the last workshop. We first formed a strategic foundational understanding of how clean energy reuse can fit into and be integrated into EPA Brownfields grant application. The first takeaway is early versioning is important because your successful revitalization projects often rely on early stage planning that can include envisioning potential future reuse for this site. It's crucial to have a clear vision for the site's future. The second takeaway is Brightfields or clean energy on brownfields align with EPA strategic goals on multiple fronts. For example, it's aligned with goal number 2, advancing environmental justice, goal number 4, ensuring clean and healthy air for all. Then we also talk about how Brightfields, the reuse of clean energy, can impact scoring and evaluation on multiple fronts. Brightfield specific reuse considerations are directly related to 25 and 35 points in 5 sections. And depending on how your projects address energy burden or incorporate workforce developments, it will also shape for other sections. We spent a lot of time in the last workshop to talk about strategies to enhance key sections related to Brightfield specific reuse considerations. Here are the 3 sections, and for each of the section, we provided what are the best practices, what are the effective methods and approaches to strengthen each of these sections and increase your application competitiveness. We also share the tools to quantify the energy production, emission reduction, and cost savings. This will be super helpful for this second section of outcomes and benefits of overall plan for revitalization. We also share some sample languages to help clearly convey how your projects are aligned with revitalization plan, project benefits, and the reuse of infrastructure. If you remember, we also invited Lily from Urban Development Authority of Pittsburgh to have a fireside chat with us. URA of Pittsburgh successfully got cleanup grants last year. She shared their application processes, lots of takeaways, answered some questions our audience have. It was a great chat. I recommend people to go back to the recording to look at it. So in the last workshop, we talked about the 3 sections, and in this workshop, we will dive into another section that is directly related to your clean energy reuse, which is the section of resources needed for site reuse. And for the sections in the application that are not directly related to clean energy reuse, but if your projects address energy burden or incorporate workforce development, they will also shape these 4 sections. In this workshop, we will dive into this section of advancing environmental justice. Here's today's agenda. We will first dive into the section of advancing environmental justice with Brightfields, and then we will dive into the section relevant to how to leverage resources for clean energy reuse. Maggie will give a presentation on how to leverage the KSU TAB's easy tool to streamline brownfields grant application. I use it, it's great. And then we will wrap up and share the next steps. With that, I'm going to turn to Matthew for the next section.
Great. Thank you, Jubing. And welcome everyone. As a reminder, I think if you did attend the last workshop, great. Feel free to look back at the recording or slides that we've shared previously via the link or email. If you weren't able to attend this, we're basically continuing on with working through the brownfield grant application. So that's what these sections are. And the sections that Jubing just recently recapped, you can find additional suggestions, best practices, tools, as she said, in the previous workshop deck. So we are breaking this up intentionally so we don't overwhelm you with one single deep dive of the application. And we hope this second part is productive and helpful for you. So for the environmental justice section, there are actually 2 parts. There's identifying areas of environmental justice, and then there's advancing environmental justice. We're going to focus on the latter here for this, but I do want to note that some of the tools that we share might be helpful for identifying areas and communities of environmental justice or impacted by that. So the 5 points that are directly related to advancing environmental justice, the EPA guidelines focus on how the strategy for reuse or the projected site reuse will advance environmental justice and minimize the displacement of residents and/or businesses among underserved communities in target areas. And again, that's 5 points here. So we're going to talk about particularly how a clean energy reuse can help advance environmental justice at all stages of development. We're going to look at before development, how can you choose a site that will have the most positive impact? We're going to look at during development, how can my Brightfield help train and employ a local workforce? And after development, how can my Brightfield establish lasting environmental justice impacts? Those are going to be the three categories for how we look at this as we work forward. So starting with before development, the Key focus here for us is on how applications and applicants can prioritize sites with legacies of environmental injustice. So really thinking about what the site history is and how that impacts what the future can be. Looking at how applicants can prioritize sites that disproportionately expose communities to pollution and climate risks. And the best way to do that, or one of the most straightforward ways that you can do that, is to use EPA's EJ screen tool. I believe this is mentioned in the application itself. It's mentioned in multiple grant applications that EPA releases, but it's a very valuable tool to get data on your community, and you can look at a range of different threats and hazards here. So relevant data that this tool offers: pollution and sources of that pollution, health disparities, data on climate change, and other socioeconomic information is all enwrapped in this EJ screen tool. Here's a here's a little excerpt from that. So if you're actually going through and using that, and we'll send the links to these tools out as a follow-up, or maybe we're already putting them in the chat, I think. Yeah, we'll make sure that you get these links directly. You can look here, for instance, at low-income census tracts in your community and say, hey, which areas have which sites and which areas of our community have lower income or other socioeconomic factors that might make them more competitive in this application due to longstanding environmental injustices. You can also look to see census tracts near hazardous waste, right? And if we're looking at the menu here on the sidebar, you can see all the different types of indices that EPA offers through this tool, from lead paint to traffic proximity, toxic releases of air, underground storage tanks, the list goes on. So that's one way that you can understand kind of the before and the context for your site. I'm sure many of you have additional site details from site history that you might be thinking about as well. This is a good way to get and use the data that EPA has itself in its own application. When we think now about during development, how can your Brightfield help train and employ a local workforce? The two main areas that we think about here would be how can applications prioritize or require training and hiring of local workers, and how can applicants prioritize bids from local or minority-owned contractors. So there are multiple ways to do that. We're going to highlight just a couple examples, and just to give you a sense of what's possible, but just know that there are multiple ways to actually achieve these goals during development. And we have multiple resources we can share if you have questions about how to engage on, once you get past this stage of development, how you can engage with a local workforce. So one example, one of the largest planned Brightfield projects, and one of the largest planned landfill solar projects in the country is in downtown Houston. So it's planned and permitted currently. It's not constructed yet, but it's planned in a particularly low income and historically marginalized Sunnyside neighborhood. They're estimating 52 megawatts over a 240 acre closed landfill, which is expected to power about 12,000 homes. One of the key features of how they are planning for this project is to include a solar training program aimed at bolstering a local and regional workforce, both focused on solar energy technologies and direct construction related activities, as well as STEM education related to the project as a catalyst. So, and in fact, this project specifically has already leveraged additional funding to support that workforce training too. So they're able to pull that into, they'd be able to pull that into a future grant application if they needed to. So this is one way to think about, maybe at this stage, if you're thinking about applying for a grant, or an EPA Brownfield grant, how can you say, hey, this is a goal we have. We're looking to aspire during development and construction of this project, if it moves forward, to hire locally. Here's an example, or here's a way that we plan to do this, right? Again, we're looking forward and projecting how this could work. Obviously, you're not seeking funds specifically from this Brownfield grant application to do that solar training program, but that doesn't mean you can't talk aspirationally about the direction you want this project to go. There we go. Whoops. So again, that's looking during development, how you can prioritize training and hiring of local workers. Specific when we do work with communities on specific RFQ or RFP designs, so request for proposal or request for qualifications and request for proposal design, we're also thinking about, hey, what are the requirements of either your community? Maybe you have a local hiring or minority-owned business hiring requirement or extra points that are given in the scoring for that. If you do, that's also something you can add to this application. Hey, when we move forward with this project, this will be part of our criteria for evaluation of our project. So now looking after development, or as development completes and the project gets operationalized, how can this Brightfield support lasting environmental justice? So applicants here, the two areas we're going to look at are applicants can pursue community solar, which we'll explain in a moment if you're unfamiliar with that. And applicants could also use this as a catalyst for future education and workforce development on clean energy, even if that's not supporting the actual construction of this project. So I'm going to focus on community solar here. For those who are not familiar with the term, community solar increases the ability for people to access clean energy. It is basically an accounting and subscription program for the solar project on how it gets accounted for on your bill or on a multiple residential bills. So when we're looking at this here, we do have specific guidance if you want to dig into this specifically, or you can reach out to us as part of our technical assistance when you get to that stage, or if you want to think more intentionally about whether or how you can plan a community solar project. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the most important thing to understand is that this is about increasing access to solar energy and fixed cost energy resources. So when we're thinking about this primarily for residential customers, we also include renters and people without a viable rooftop. That's one of the benefits, viable rooftop for hosting solar. That's one of the benefits of community solar. It's an accounting, not a physical structure or locational way of deploying solar. So it allows them to purchase or buy clean energy and potentially reduce their energy burden depending on current rates and their energy market without actually physically installing the solar. There are a few caveats here. One being it's not legal everywhere to do this, or it must be enabled by the state or local electric utility. And then there are multiple different ownership structures. It doesn't have to be a municipality, local government, or even necessarily a utility that owns or administers this program. There are multiple structures, municipality-owned, utility-owned, third-party owned, or sometimes customer-owned that can exist here. So if you think that this is a goal of yours for the project, incorporating a community solar reuse vision for your brownfield grant can help speak to environmental justice concerns when we are thinking about reducing energy burdens of affected populations. So one more quick annotation and stamp exercise before we continue with this section. And as a reminder, or if you joined us a little bit late, there are two different ways you can access the annotation function. Great. So just a quick pulse check here on how you're thinking about environmental justice. If you're applying for the grant, a grant this cycle, great. Let us know how you're thinking about it. If not, don't worry. Just share how you or your community might be thinking about environmental justice as it relates to your Brownfields program or your community at large. So we're going to focus here on kind of in development and in action, and then also beyond the project. So thinking ahead in terms of your ideas. Just go ahead and annotate one, the top idea or concept that your community is thinking about for inaction or beyond. You might be thinking about multiple, but I want to know what's the most pressing or most topical issue of environmental justice that you're thinking about. And I'll also use this as a moment to pause if anyone has questions on community solar, or if anyone has questions on any of the environmental justice aspects that we've talked about so far. You can raise your hand, you can put them in the chat, whatever is easiest. Great. All right, so taking a look at what folks are responding to here, it seems like the highest priority here for kind of during development, when you're thinking about project development, is hiring and training workers from the local community. Great to see you're all thinking about that. If you're sourcing materials from local businesses or minority-owned businesses, that's also great. So keep up the good work there. As a reminder, as you get further with this project, And this is something that our technical assistants can help with. Thinking about how you're going to actually evaluate that clean energy project from procurement purposes can help also advance some of these goals. So if you have questions about how that would work, be happy to share or address that. And I see a question from Mitch here in the chat. Mitch, feel free to come off mute or type it into the chat. No problem. Take your time, Mitch. While Mitch is typing in his question, I will just add that when you're thinking beyond the project, it sounds like folks here are thinking intentionally about providing affordable energy to low-income families. Great. Really trying to reduce that energy burden. And then also about increasing opportunities for marginalized communities to participate in the energy transition. Both are great. Maybe you're thinking about both already. I know I asked you to just pick one. Glad to hear that you're all thinking about that so far.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, this is Mitch Dorsk from the Southern Ute Indian Tribe.
Yeah, welcome.
And I am the remediation program manager, in charge of the general assistance in brownfields programs. We also have our brownfields coordinator, or as we refer to them, the remediation scientist, Crystal Kelly, here as well. We have a pretty robust brownfields program already with the 128A and bill programs. And we're looking into opportunities with Brightfields to reuse brownfield sites for renewable energy projects. The question I have for TAB and Rocky Mountain Institute is we're a little unfamiliar with the Brightfields program, trying to learn. And a lot of the examples that you have provided and also that we have seen are really macro examples, very large scale projects like you just showed for cities, for huge municipalities. And I don't want to speak for other tribal entities, but at least for Southern Ute, we're very micro compared to these macro examples. And I'm just curious if you have experience or advice for more micro examples to apply Brightfields to, meaning a gigawatt or a 5 gigawatt solar facility, something like that. A kilowatt, rather. Sorry.
Yeah, kilowatt. I was going to just confirm that you were going in the other direction there.
Kilowatt. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Fantastic question. So first, just to acknowledge like the scale that we're showing, one of the reasons we show that is to show what's possible, but actually a majority of the Brightfields built to date are much smaller than that. So in terms of like what's possible, a lot of them are under there are many that are under a megawatt that have been built. And so that can be much smaller for a single facility or a few small facilities or a small town or a small tribal community. So there are a lot of opportunities where that has already, or examples of where that's been built. I will acknowledge the economies of scale relevance here, though. So the bigger project you can get, the better rate you'll get kind of on a per kilowatt hour basis for ultimate generation. So when we're working with a community or a tribe on exploring options, we want to look first to see if there are bigger opportunities for your own benefit to get a more cost-effective project. But there are certainly ways to structure, and there are certainly smaller projects that have penciled out in the right markets with the right incentives or with the right structure in place if it's going behind the meter for a certain facility too. So there are multiple ways to think about that. And we'd be happy to talk with you offline from this to explore any specific facility or site questions you have.
Can I add one quick thing, Matthew?
Yes,
Mitch, we don't know the context yet, but another thing we see commonly on smaller sites is to put batteries there. So that could be another path you follow.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. Hey, we're glad we're glad you're thinking about smaller sites too. They deserve some love in this conversation, and certainly we want to see any kind of brownfield site move forward with reuse that's productive for the community. Yep, thanks a lot. Great question. Feel free to continue to type in more questions if you have them. Mitch started us off very strong here. I'm going to go ahead and clear these drawings and we'll move on with the rest of this section. go. Great. So shifting a little bit to how you can determine energy burden. That's really what I want to talk about here for the next couple slides. One of the ways that you can stress how a project, especially a project that is intended to use clean energy as a reuse, can advance environmental justice is by reducing energy burdens. When we talk about energy burden, it's the percentage of income that is dedicated to your energy bill or electricity bill. It depends. An energy burden can include any fuel too. So really your energy bills overall, specifically in this case, will speak to the electricity bill. So one of the valuable tools that exists called the LEAD tool from the U.S. Department of Energy, that's the Low Income Energy Affordability Data Tool, or LEAD. And it can show and locate communities that have disproportionately high energy burdens. So I'll give you a quick preview of how that works, but it's a fairly easy tool to navigate, and you can go in and zoom in on your community to see what data they have there. Particular data that this tool can show: areas of high energy burden, household income, demographic information, and other socioeconomic information. So you can have that whole context of not just, where are prices high, but also where are prices high relative to the community impacted. So when we're looking at how this tool would operate, on the right here, you can see that there's a legend of household income that's being shown right now. So this is the median household income base map that we're using in this example. But you can go ahead and add other layers here. So here we're looking majority non-white population in this area plus household income. And then we're also filtering for a high energy burden. And you can see the specific areas in this kind of southwest area of Greater Chicago that stand out here. So very quickly, you can zoom in and focus on parts of your community that have higher energy burdens relative to certain household income levels, relative to many other socioeconomic factors as well. So if your site is in a census tract designated as either an energy community or a low income community, that also increases the incentives available to help your project effectively reduce energy costs. Now, there's a lot to talk about on these two designations. And effectively what the energy community and low income community designation is, it's a bonus tax credit for clean energy reuse. This is a bit of a spoiler for our next workshop, where we're going to go into more depth on how these actually work and how you can think about the clean energy tax credits as part of your reuse and redevelopment strategy. But I wanted to give you a preview in case that helps note which parts of your community are impacted when we're thinking about advancing environmental justice. So in this case, the energy community tax credit bonus focuses on area with historically high fossil fuel employment, areas where a coal plant has closed, or areas where a brownfield is. That would be how this is defined. This map from the U.S. Department of Energy can specifically show areas where there's the higher fossil fuel employment historically, or where a coal plant has closed that are affected by that. So citing that in your application and say, hey, look, we want to advance environmental justice by reinvesting a clean energy project within an energy community already and using that as part of our strategy to rehabilitate this area impacted by X, Y, and Z. So that is a good opportunity for taking a look at this map to get a little bit more of that picture of not only how the federal government's looking at this from an incentive standpoint and the tax code now, but also how your community, has evolved over time. Similarly, when we talk about low income, there are a lot of ways to get income and socioeconomic based, data, as we've already shown, but this can show specific areas that are eligible for this low income community tax credit bonus for clean energy reuse projects. So you have two different elements here. You have the green is census tracts that meet the new market tax credit program's threshold. So similar definition with the new market tax credit program. And then similarly with the additional selection criteria, you can see light purple or dark purple, which indicate specific climate and economic justice screening tool thresholds for disadvantaged populations. So there are multiple ways. We had that DOE LEAD tool, and we have these two maps to show areas that are impacted by different types of environmental injustice situations. So purposefully designed Brightfields can help reduce energy burdens and advance environmental justice. And I'll offer, as we did in the last workshop, I'll offer a couple potential template language ideas of how you could incorporate this directly into your application. So don't take this is not scripture here, but if you wanted to flag energy burdens for disadvantaged populations, you could take a look at these types of examples where we're saying, hey, according to the DOE lead tool, this site is in this census tract, which has an energy burden of X%, which is higher than the national average of 6%. Or you could look at your state average or your regional average if you had that data. Alternatively, you could just think about how you're talking about the average annual energy costs in that census tract. So there are multiple ways to get at describing this. These are two fairly concise ways to try to squeeze that into your application if you're thinking of trying to do that. Similarly, if you want to speak about what the project on a reuse opportunity is eligible for in terms of incentives, again, we'll go into detail on how those incentives work in our 5th workshop for clean energy reuse. But here's 2 examples of sample language. So if you wanted to say, because the site of our prospective solar project is in census tract X, it is eligible for the low-income communities bonus tax credit adder for clean energy projects. This will allow the project team to invest in local workforce training as well, right? So you can think about, hey, because we're eligible for more incentives, we can also invest in other pieces to enhance the quality of the project and who benefits from that. Similarly, you could talk about how it could reduce subscription costs if you were thinking about a community solar project. Again, these are just 4 examples of language that you could potentially incorporate if that's relevant for your project into your application under this section. Wanted to give you a quick, very concise way of how to frame this, but there's certainly many more than this. And last but not least here, let's see. Yeah, last but not least here, our accelerator can help you develop these critical partnerships. So if you want technical assistance, and we'll talk about those services at the end again as a reminder, but this is part of what we offer. We can help provide guidance on community solar, really get into program design details and structures with you, your community or utility. We can give examples of how that's been working in other markets or similar markets, and what kind of project design structures you have and options you have for how that can benefit your community and reduce energy burdens. Similarly, we can support community visioning and facilitation on how to strategically reduce energy burden. We can offer examples to highlight local leadership and decision-making. And certainly last but not least, provide guidance on funding and incentives to invest in low-income or disadvantaged communities, as well as help you understand the apprenticeship and wage requirements for federal incentives. That is a mouthful. We will go into more of the last 2 there in our 5th workshop. So again, just continue to plug that. With that, I will open it again up for questions and pass it over to Tansy to continue this journey, if there are none.
All right, I will take it away. And as Matthew's been saying, please put questions in the chat and we can answer them as we go. So hi everyone, my name is Tansy Massey Green. I'm going to be speaking now about leveraging resources for clean energy reuse. So EPA prefers applicants that can leverage outside resources and whose grants are likely to attract future resources. The EPA guidelines specifically say, please describe your access to monetary funding from other resources and how the grant will stimulate the availability of additional funds to support the completion of the environmental site assessment or remediation and subsequent reuse strategy at the priority site. And this is worth 5 points. So EPA is really looking for what other resources can you leverage in addition to this grant, and what are you going to be utilizing to make it so that your project certainly moves forward. Leveraging resources can come from the applicant or third-party sources, and they can take many different forms. The obvious ones are cash resources. These are grants and other funding, such as other federal funding, that will be used to complete the project, specifically the cleanup portion of the project. And these should already be secured at the time of the application. So some examples of cash resources are general fund commitments, tax credits for any cleanup, state grants, etc. The not so obvious in-kind resources are non-cash resources necessary for the grant's completion, and they will materialize over the course of the project. Some examples here are staff time, supplies, pro bono consulting, legal support, and more. And this can be the RMI Brightfields Accelerator, something that would fall into this category, leveraging expertise or technical assistance from the Brightfields Accelerator. And then there's outside the box thinking, so other resources that will be leveraged. These are non-cash resources which should be helpful but are not necessary for the grant's completion. Some examples here are long-term site lease revenue, historic preservation, or clean energy tax credits, opportunity zone designation, etc. And so these first two categories that we covered, the obvious and the not so obvious, are ones that are necessary to demonstrate in the application. And the not so obvious and outside the box categories offer a competitive boost in the application. All right. So we encourage you to really take the time to describe all financial resources that your team can leverage. This is an example of a successful cleanup grant application in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, and it makes it easy to see which resources are secured. I won't read each of these listed, but you can see that some are secured, some are potential, and they're all important to include in the application. And we'll share these slides around so you can see exactly what's included in this example. I wanted to talk about the investment tax credit, which falls into that third category of what we talked about, the outside of the box thinking, because the investment tax credit is now available to local governments and other nonprofits to make Brightfields more affordable. So this won't be the cleanup portion of the grant. It'll be after cleanup, the reuse portion. So it's not required to include in the grant application, but it will certainly make your application more competitive if you can describe how you'll be using it. But also, before we dive into it, I just want to say up front that these tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act are likely not to go away. We think that tax credits will stay regardless of which the administration, the future administration, and the different bonuses that we talk about here might be on the table, but we still think the investment tax credit will continue. So the investment tax credit, how much is there? It's a 30 to 70% credit on upfront costs. There's different bonuses that are available to make it so that the tax credit can be valued up to that 70% upfront cost. But at its base, it's a 30% tax credit, and the bonuses are based on what type of material you use. So if you use domestic content in the materials for your project, you'll get an extra 10% bonus. Where if the project is installed in an energy community, tribal community, or low income community, there's an extra bonus for that. If it's in an energy community, which includes brownfields, coal communities, and other communities that have relied economically on fossil fuels, there is a bonus for that. And that's certainly what makes brownfields more financially attractive. They are eligible for this energy community bonus. And finally, who benefits? So if the project is under 5 megawatts and it financially benefits tribal communities or low-income communities, it's eligible for an additional 20% bonus. On the right is a diagram of how these tax credits stack up. So we talked about that 30% investment tax credit as the base. And then there's these bonuses that will make it up to a 70% tax credit. So that's 10% for domestic content, an additional 10% for an energy community, and an additional 10 or 20% if your project's either located in a low-income community or benefits a low-income community or tribal community. And we say that these are available to local governments and other nonprofits because direct pay opens the credits to tax-exempt entities. Basically, tax-exempt entities follow a process to get the value of the tax credit in a check from the IRS. We have a tool that our team developed called the Afford tool, which is the America's Federal Funding Opportunities and Resources for Decarbonization tool. It's totally a mouthful, which is why we call it the Afford tool. And it can help identify and prioritize federal funding relevant to your project. So there's the ability to filter all the different federal funding opportunities by if it's in a Brightfield or a renewable energy project or a bunch of different options that you can choose from. So you can filter to only see programs or funding opportunities that are for Brightfields. And then you also now have the ability to compare the different credits and grants and loans. So you can see what they're each going to ask for. And I'll show what that looks like in just a sec. Our Afford intro page has 4 questions that guides you through, it guides you through 4 questions for a more intuitive experience, especially for those who are new to federal funding and incentives. And so what these 4 questions will ask you are you new to applying for federal funding? What kind of entity you are, local government, nonprofit, business. Select one or more types of the project. So here's where you'll choose what type of opportunities you want to see. And then finally, what types of funding are you interested in? Grants, tax credits, formula grants, all that stuff. And then once you select all those 4 questions, it'll take you to the tool where you'll see which programs fall into the categories that you've selected out of the more than 250 funding opportunities that we have here. So here there's 57 opportunities displayed here. And you can even filter those further if you want to see a shorter list. Then there's also a search by keyword ability. So if you know about a grant that you want to check out, you can always put it here or search by keyword, and you'll see the grants that fall into that search categorization. And then you can reset if you don't like those different the different filters that you selected in the beginning. We also now have the ability to compare and share with the Afford tool, so you can easily focus on programs of interest and share with those on your team. And so what this looks like is, once you're reviewing that list of, 20 or 50 programs, you'll go through and you can choose 3 different programs, up to 3 different programs that you think may be of interest. And then from there, it'll take you to a page where you can kind of compare the 3. We thought of this while we were designing it, like the Best Buy page where you can compare different products. We want to do that with grants. And then you'll have the ability up here in the right corner to share the comparison with others on your team. And so I'm telling you all about the Afford tool so that when you're thinking about what other resources you can leverage for this grant application, this will be a good way for you to look at the different options available to you. All right, we have another fun annotation exercise. I know you all are annotation experts, so here's a quick reminder for you to get back to the annotation. I would like you now to think expansively about what resources can be contributed in kind. So here we have our favorite reCAPTCHA box to make sure you all are not robots. So please select all the squares with eligible in-kind resources. Feel free to use a check mark if you think that is an eligible resource and a question mark if you're really not sure what the picture is demonstrating or if it would qualify. I'll give everyone just 10 more seconds to complete this one. Okay. I see lots of questions with the website one, which is totally fair. And I'll explain to you what that means in just a sec. But what we're going for here is any non-cash resources that applicants can use to complete their grant are certainly good resources to list in your grant application. This includes staff and volunteers. So good job, everyone that put check marks in that top left corner. And of course, good job to everyone that put a check mark with the cash. This also can include office supplies, office spaces, and use of digital platforms. So those are those bottom two boxes. We have a nice conference room in the bottom left corner that can certainly be listed as a type of resource. And with the website, I just showed you the Afford website. And maybe not that exactly will help you successfully complete your grant, but thinking like that, any use of digital platforms that could be leveraged can go towards your grant. These were all listed by St. Duke's Development Corp from Minnesota in their successful FY22 cleanup grant application. Good job, everyone. You are not robots. Let's clear out. Would someone mind clearing this for me? Thank you. So we would definitely say to think expansively about additional resources that could boost confidence in your ability to advance reuse. Acquiring additional resources in the grant, it says the degree to which the applicant's organization has a system in place to appropriately acquire any additional expertise and resources like contractors, subrecipients required to successfully complete the project. So we'd certainly say that when in doubt, include the resource in your narrative. And while brownfield grants don't require you to list these resources, you do have to describe the system by which you will acquire them. So for example, your public relations firm might be used to develop press releases and other appeals for project funding, or your grant writing consultant might be used to respond to new opportunities for funding. Your peers in the Brightfields Accelerator, like us, might be used to connect you with new resources and improve your capacity to apply for new funding. Here's a couple of sample applicant responses. In the interest of time, I won't read these out, but as I've said, these slides will be shared with you and you can pull from these languages, from the language here. Any questions about this section about leveraging resources? If not, I'm going to pass it back off to Maggie with KSU, and she's going to talk about the TAB EZ tool for streamlined brownfield grant applications. Maggie, off to you.
All right. Thank you, Tansy. Hello again, everyone. So I'm just going to take several minutes here to share with you one of the e-tools that we have. It's called the TAB EZ grant writing tool, and it's available free to use for anybody. You do have to have a KSU TAB account to access it because it's secured with a password. But really, the intent of the tool is just to help you navigate the grant guidelines for any of the various grant applications that you are wanting to apply for. Here's where the tool is located, the web page. Once you log on here, you just click the gold button that says Get Started with TAB EZ. We also on this page do have links to sample grant applications. So even if you're maybe not using the tool, but you want a quick link or resource guide to some example successful applications, you can access those here as well as our webpage in general. To get started with the tool itself, like I said, you can click the gold button at the top that says Get Started with Tab EZ, and then you will be asked to log in. If you already have an existing Tab account, great, just put in your email address and password. And if you don't have one, it provides you an opportunity to go ahead and register for an account. Once you're logged into Tab EZ, this is the Tab EZ homepage that you will see. It's the same page. I just wanted to give kind of two different viewpoints. So the image on the left is what you would see if you're completely brand new to Tab EZ. You'll notice it says my grant applications at the top is just solid purple. There's nothing there. That's if you don't, this is your first time with Tab EZ and you don't have any grant applications. If you've used Tab EZ in the past or you're currently using it, the image there on the right shows you what it would look like with the listing of all your current and past grant applications to where you can access to do additional edits or just go back and look. To get started with the grant application, whether you're a new user or an existing user, you just click the gold button to start your grant application. You will be asked to select the type of grant that you're applying for, and you will see here we have grant templates for all of the different types of EPA Brownfields grants being offered in that particular competition year. Once you select your grant, you're taken to an overview page. This is just full of information that has a lot of just quick points pulled out for the guidelines. It's recommended that you read this page, don't skip it, because it does include some very important key information, such as how long can the application be, your page limits, what are font requirements, and then of course there's also links here to EPA FAQs and some other resources that can help you develop your grant. From there, you are taken to a configuration page. This just asks you a few questions about your funding and some other questions if there's particular eligibility requirements for a particular grant. It's just kind of a double check for you. Some of the information that you put here in the configuration will auto-populate to the relevant sections within the grant guideline. And then this is just an example. So what Tab EZ does is it takes the, it produces an outline based on the type of grant you are applying for, and then walks you through each section and subsection of that particular grant. That way you don't miss anything. This is just an example, as you can see here, depending on what type of grant you are applying for, the outline and the criteria you need to address might look a little bit different. Say for example, a cleanup grant, this is for threshold, has quite a bit more threshold criteria requirements than, say, if you are applying for a community-wide assessment grant. And then you've selected your grant type, you've configured it, now you're ready to go ahead and get started typing. Under grant content, you'll see that outline, as I just mentioned, is there on the left-hand side. Excuse me. You'll see for each section, there's the grant guidelines themselves there at the top, and then immediately below that is the evaluation criteria. So you can see both. Within the guideline themselves, they're separate into two separate sections. Tab EZ combines it into one, so you can make sure that you're addressing both the criteria and then what you will be being scored on. Most of our grant sections have what we call helpful hints. You can click on that. It's an external resource developed by Tab that just provides some additional food for thought, some tips for addressing criteria in a particular section. And this is just an example. If you click on that helpful hint button, what that looks like. When you're done drafting your narrative in the text box, you want to make sure that you save. You have a couple different options here. You can save your work. And as you can see, if you just save it, then the circle on the outline is only half full. That means, let's say you're working in a particular area, but you get sidetracked. Someone's at your door or you need to step away for a few minutes. you can come back knowing, oh, this section isn't complete because the circle's only halfway done. And then you can go back into Tab EZ into this section and continue drafting. If a section is 100% complete, you hit save and complete, and then the circle there on the left will be fully, I guess, fully circled, fully colored in. So you know, oh, I've already taken care of that section and I don't need to go back. Once you have addressed all the criteria and all the sections, you can export your what you drafted in Tab EZ into Word to do any final editing, polishing, and things like that. You'll have the option to select either all of the documents in one, or you can just export the individual components of the grant. So the narrative information sheet, the narrative ranking criteria, and then the threshold criteria. You also, Tab EZ also allows you to add participants. So if you're working on a grant project with somebody else in your organization, or you're working with a consultant to help, you can go ahead and add them as a participant. So it allows everybody to work on the grant in one space and you know what they're doing. You can easily manage your participants by removing them if, or giving them different levels of access. So let's say you want an opportunity to review anything that somebody else puts in, you can change that permission within the manage participant feature of Tab EZ. So that's our tool. I can pause real quick. Does anybody have any questions about Tab EZ? Okay. And then I just wanted to put together a few kind of reminders and tips for tying in your grant application. This is just kind of a general overview of what the grant timeline looks like. So whether you're applying this year or maybe going to be applying in the future, this overall timeline will generally be the same. Guidelines are released. Hopefully, if you are applying, you are in a window to where you're drafting and you are polishing your application. If you are applying for a cleanup grant, you needed to have your public meeting no later than October 31st. So hopefully that's already done. And if you haven't already, now is the time to get your grant application in for a KSU TAB review. That will allow time for any additional edits, routing through internal concurrence, and then submitting your application through grants.gov by the deadline next Thursday, November 14th. Just a reminder for some people, Monday is Veterans Day, and that is a holiday for a lot of organizations, local governments. So if you are needing to route an application for that internal concurrence or somebody else needs to submit it through grants.gov, keep that in mind as you're making those final edits that they might not be in the office or working on Monday. Some food for thought as you're polishing your narrative and your grant application. Just make sure that you are communicating your identity very clearly. For those that are unfamiliar with the process, your grant application will be reviewed by 3 separate reviewers, and probably at least one reviewer, they might not even know anything about brownfields. They're pulled from other federal organizations. So they certainly aren't going to know anything about your community or your needs. So I like to think that when you're drafting your narrative and your application, you are really writing to that person, to that 3rd reviewer that doesn't know anything about brownfields and doesn't know anything about your community. So you really want to be clear and concise, but talk about your community and your identity and why you need the brownfield funds to support a project. Make sure that you maximize on the most compelling elements of your story. Are you a community that's historically based on agriculture or tourism or an old industrial community? What are some unique characteristics that you have that maybe other communities don't? Again, kind of driving that. You want to kind of pull the reviewer in to, so at the end, when they're done reviewing your application, yes, they want to fund you. They want to give you the money. You also want to make sure that the project that you are proposing, the sites you're assessing, cleaning up, really fall in line with larger regional, state, or a national initiative. How is your reuse of these particular properties falling in line with other initiatives in your area. Definitely read the guidelines and make sure you answer all components of a question. Sometimes there's a lot of ands in there and ors. Sometimes there's several little subsections. You definitely want to make sure that you are addressing every little thing. If something doesn't apply to you, your community, your project, that's perfectly fine. Just make sure you state that. Like, one of the, I think, criteria is small population. If you happen to not be small population, that's perfectly fine, but say you're not small population, just so, again, a reviewer doesn't think that you've missed or ignored that particular criteria. And then really, they are limited on pages. It's 10 pages for the assessment grants, cleanup grants, 12 pages for the community or the state and tribe CWAG street grants, and 12 pages for RLF. So it's not a lot of pages to tell your story and highlight your project. So make sure that you are succinct, you use good words, and tell your story well. And then kind of think about your narrative should read as a good cohesive story. So you start with your project description that talks about you, your community, your challenges, and how they're impacting your community, you know, why you need the money, how you're engaging the community, and all of that really funnels in to your tasks. So you want to make sure that when you are describing your tasks and you're developing your budget for your grant, that it ties back to, you know, the brownfield sites that are listed as challenges in the beginning. You want to make sure that you're tying into what that community need and benefit and outcomes are. And then you want to make sure that your narrative matches, your budget narrative also matches the budget table, and that goes into the final, your outputs, your outcomes, and the anticipated benefits from your particular grant project, making sure that it all flows together and ties. For an example, if one of your priority sites, you're wanting to convert to clean energy using Brightfields because your community lacks, affordable utilities, you want to make sure that that's listed as a challenge in the project description, address it in the community needs section, and then, of course, the outcomes and benefits are, clean energy for your community. So make sure that that tie is there among all the sections. And again, if you haven't already, but you are drafting a narrative, request a review of your draft application. KSU, we are accepting draft applications up until 12 p.m. Central or 11 a.m. Mountain Time this Friday, November 8th. So if you are interested in receiving a review, again, for free, go ahead and email Scott. He's handling all of our grant reviews this cycle. Any questions about a grant that you might be drafting? Any grant related questions? Okay. With that, then I'm going to kick it back to Juby.
I'll jump in here. Thanks, Maggie. I was going to ask you if you had a crystal ball to let applicants know if they're going to win or not, but I think that's not a service that TAB offers specifically.
No, unfortunately, no.
No problem. Thank you so much, Maggie. So for everyone's benefit, we're gonna jump to a wrap up in a few minutes here, but I just want to note a couple things. Today was a much more focused agenda, building off of part one of this middle of this workshop series, really focused on specific sections of the application. And that's very distinct from different from a lot of the other webinars and workshops that we run on Brightfields. So if you haven't joined us for the first two of this workshop series, that'll talk more about like what Brightfields are, the opportunities, how you can think about them in your community, and how to evaluate site feasibility for that. And our technical assistance goes much beyond that. Tansy will talk about a fifth workshop that we're going to head to in a moment, or in December, and we hope you all join us for that. But today's workshop and the last workshop really focused on two specific things. If we can move to the next slide, that'd be great. And so workshop 4, building on what we did in workshop 3, provided strategies and tools to enhance key sections related to Brightfield's specific reuse considerations. And so when we're thinking about that, we're thinking specifically about best practices. We're thinking about tools and strategies that you can incorporate into your application. So if this felt like a very application heavy or focused on like the text and what does that say, that's what we're going for on this one. And we're hoping that you found that valuable if you're planning for an application this round or an application in a future year. So both workshop 3 and workshop 4 of this series are meant to basically complement each other, building on different sections, again, with those best practices, tools, and sample language. The tool links, the maps that we shared, will all make sure that those get to you via email, via the slides, for you to use as you see fit if you haven't already written them down from the chat. So again, thanks for joining us for this, participating with the annotations and polls. I'll let Tansy take it from here for the final wrap up. And we really hope that this focus on commons, on pragmatic language here and how to navigate those data and tools is valuable and appreciated.
Thanks, Matthew. I wanted to quickly highlight what the technical assistance that we have is available. You know, after you apply for a cleanup grant and you decide you want to, continue to get some help with the clean energy reuse portion of your brownfield, that's what we're here to do. And even if you're not applying for a grant right now, we can offer technical assistance. So what we can provide is identifying your most promising Brightfields opportunity. So this is going to look like looking at different sites that maybe you're considering for clean energy reuse. We'll do a site pre-screen and help you think about strategic reuse planning. And we can also help with utility engagement, as that's often part of the picture when you're thinking about building a clean energy project. Also, like this, we can help with a funding and financing strategy. So outside of the brownfield grant application, that's one part. We'll also help you think about all the different resources that you might want to leverage for the clean energy reuse portion. We began to talk about that a little bit today, and we'll be talking about it more next workshop. And we also can help accelerating Brightfields procurement, so providing clean energy procurement support and providing insights from the Brightfields market. All of this support we can do on a one-on-one basis. Outside of this cohort, we give you some tips here, but we can provide you with a more tailored experience to really fit the needs of your community. And if there's needs that are outside of what's listed here, that's also something that we can help with, as long as it's advancing your clean energy project on a brownfield. Next steps, we will share the slides and the notes from today by November 11th. Our final workshop will be on December 10th, and it'll focus on the full suite of funding opportunities for Brightfields. So this will really be getting out of the Brownfields Grants mindset and thinking about how to fund the clean energy reuse. We'll be talking about grants, diving deep into the tax credits, and talking about other types of financing opportunities that are available for these types of projects. And we'll share the recording and all the learning resources that we touched on for today. Any final questions or comments before we go to the last portion of today? And if not, I think you know where to find us, and you can certainly ask us questions via email.
Yeah, let's throw up the survey. We can keep the chat open and stay on the line for any questions as people come up for air.
Yes, so please fill out the event evaluation form. We're going to put the link of the survey in the chat. You can also do that by scanning this QR code. And a quick disclaimer here on the work that is funded by EPA. We really appreciate you filling out the survey. It helps us make these workshops better for you, and that's what we're here for, to provide you all with support. So please fill out that survey in the last few minutes. And we'll stay on the line until the end to answer any questions. But with that, thank you all for joining.
And good luck with your grant applications if you're planning to submit them. We hope that goes well, and we hope it is not a super stressful experience of submitting. Great. And for those who didn't see the chat message, if you do need any of the tools, maps, or resources we shared in advance of the application deadline, sooner than the 11th, when we plan to, which is the latest we plan to send out the recording, please just let us know directly or ask right now if we can bump up the link.
Cindy, I just saw your note. Would you like to run through the Afford tool now or schedule a follow-up?
Yes, if anybody has time. I got to the website, but at the end, when you printed out the community need and low income communities, and it kind of filtered out a whole lot of opportunities, I was wondering how to get to that point.
Oh, sure.
Let's stop the recording here, and then we can have a